All right, for those who've seen Hackers, let's see if this goes. It's not going to go? Oh.
Now, use your best viruses to buy us some time. We have to get into Plague's file and copy the worm.
All right, that was a little tension breaker that had to be done, all right?
Okay, so tension breaker, right? I think only a few of you got that. So before we go any further, I want to give a very thank you to the organizers of JSConf EU who believed that security had a place at a developer event. There was 3 talks about security at a developer event, and that is absolutely unheard of. And I am very, very grateful for this opportunity. Please, everyone, give a giant thank you to Jan, Holger, Tiffany, and Mate. Yes, thank you. So, hey, everyone, I'm Adam. As was said, I am not a Baldwin brother. You can find me on Twitter at Adam_Baldwin and a whole bunch of other places. I'm Evil Packet on GitHub, and I'm the Chief Security Officer at And Yet, where a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about have transpired. I get to work on some really cool things like And Bang, Talkie.io, and I'm also the team lead at Lyft Security, where I get to basically help developers secure software and build security into the culture of their dev teams. I'm also the founder and organizer of the Node Security Project, a rather exciting and insane experiment to audit all of the things on NPM, which there's like 40,000 modules now, and bridge the security and dev communities and try to make them play nicely together, and we'll talk about that more later. So, as it turns out, when it comes to security, we're fucked. Right? That's basically it. Nothing is 100% secure. This is a realization that we have to come to in building software. There's going to be bugs. We're going to inject security flaws. We are going to be, eventually, at some point. So, let's talk about Risk. Risk is a board game about world domination. You spread out armies around the board in pursuit of conquering the entire Earth. It's very slow to move around armies, so a typical strategy is to focus on deploying new armies at entry points for defense, and building up armies when you're going to attack, right? In a Risk battle, you match dice 1-to-1, highest to lowest, and the attacker gets 3 dice. The defender gets 2 dice. Right there, you notice that the attacker has the advantage. But the defender can only roll with as many dice as they have armies. So when you only have 1 die left, you're rolling 1 against 3. So the attacker has broken through the outer boundary, and it's pretty easy to sweep through. And if Iceland attacks Greenland in this scenario, which is totally prone to happen, Greenland is going to get a roll with 2 dice, and it's going to be a pretty big battle. But if Greenland only defends with 1 army, in this scenario, let's be honest, Iceland's going to pwn all of North America, yes, including Alberta. Sorry, Alberta. And attackers have the advantage. Attackers basically have the advantage, and it's akin to the way it works in software too. Attackers have to find 1 flaw to gain a foothold, and as defenders, as developers, we have to find and address them all. It's a rather daunting and impossible task. Software's hard. I don't think that anybody's going to disagree with me that building software is hard enough without adding additional complexities. Software's also full of opinions. We've got things like mobile first, right? Lots of firsts. Content first. Offline first. Woo! But a lot of what you build doesn't mean crap if it's not built on a foundation of security and privacy, which can take all of the fun out of what you're building. And software is full of constraints, right? We've got constraints like time and money. A boss, pointy-haired boss that's breathing down our neck to get features ground out, right? But security is one of those constraints that has to be filtered into that sort of equation. So who's responsible for security? Anyone want to take a guess? You are. Sorry, but you need to be up to the challenge, right? Like, whether you like it or not, you're the first line of defense in addressing and fixing security flaws in the software you build. You're the ones building it. So it's time to take some responsibility for this. I was talking to Martine before the talk, and as a developer, if you don't care about security, but others care about security in your organization or that deal with that software, you're negating their effort a bit. Security is not something that you can just, it's not a department that or a third party that takes care of it for you. And if that's the way you're doing it wrong. It's just not bolt on. So why is it your responsibility? Well, people, like my wonderful family there, use your software. They use it for banking transactions and social networks and, all those private messages that we, send back and forth. You have a responsibility to handle people's data with respect and help me as the consumer of your library or of your final product that it's being done on how that security, how you're treating that data with respect. Many people that use our software would likely be outraged by how cavalier we handle some of their data. We owe them the respect to handle that appropriately. Last year, 2013, I think that's right, the NSA spent $25 million on software vulnerabilities. They purchased O-days and vulnerabilities to, do their bidding. We have a responsibility as developers to stay off of that menu, right? We should just not be part of that procurement process. Also, litigation is coming. We have the FTC, which is forcing a company called TrendNet, who had a vulnerability in some camera software, to suffer 20 years of auditing. We would love if somebody from the government forced us to have to audit our software, right? As developers, you would love that, right? That'd be great. So if we don't police and handle our in our own community, in our own software, that external force is going to come. It's going to come eventually. It's happened in other industries. So it's just something to remember. Okay, so enough doom and gloom already. Should we give up? Hell no. We fight back. We don't make this easy. We don't give in.
Not every geek with a Commodore 64 can hack into NASA.
So something has to change, right? We have to build a security-first culture. We just have to do better. And the thing is that sort of I mentioned earlier, we're fucked, right? Well, it's a constantly evolving process. We just need to take one step, do better, iterate. So I'm going to tell you about the story of And Yet and how I came to be at And Yet and how we handle security at And Yet. Basically how I was a seed crystal in And Yet, and most people know that a seed crystal will produce beautiful results given the right environment and the right growing environment, but it can't do its job without that right environment, given even best efforts. So I met Adam Brault at And Yet about 5 years ago, and I was running a consultancy called Ingenuity, and basically a single-person consultancy, two of us, and he was running a web development shop. And we realized very early on that it was a very symbiotic relationship. I could help him grow and build his business, and it meant a business for me as well. It sold contracts for him to have a partnership with security, showing that the level of care that they took in security for their software was the difference between many other very larger and named vendors. And so it started there. And so I would tell him about, hey, you wrote this and you did this wrong, right? It's all intents and purposes. And so I taught him. So early on when it was him, but as we started to add people, I was still this external entity, right? And so as he added people, they write code and I'd review it. And as we moved along, their people eventually started learning. Hey, we don't have cross-site scripting vulnerabilities as much as we review code. Those have just sort of gone away because we've learned about that. And as he grew from 1 to 2 to 10 to now, say, 23 people, at some point, I sold Ingenuity and actually went to work for Andiat. We basically merged the security practice right into the company. And that's where I had a really interesting revelation. I'm part of the company now. I can do more impact because I'm internal, right? So secure all the things, I thought. And yeah, it doesn't work like that. You can't just come in and say, we're going to do this, 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 this. It just doesn't, it doesn't work like that. And I really learned that you have to take steps one at a time and just iterate and do better and increment, or for a short period of time you're going to see an improvement, but then it's going to die. Your people are going to go back to their old habits. And there's huge pushback to all of the things that I wanted to do, and we're still a couple years later continuing to implement on that initial vision we've had, and so it's been a slow iterating process. So the one interesting thing about education, which I'm going to go to this a little bit later. So why do we avoid avoid security? Why do we avoid doing it? Why was I getting pushback on securing all the things and things like that? Well, one of the big things is ignorance. We don't know what we don't know. We also don't like to have things pointed out when we do them wrong. It's not a good feeling in any way. We also procrastinate. It's way easier to procrastinate and put off this adding those features because it's really cool building the new hotness, right? Rather than figuring out how to actually secure the new hotness. It's not particularly exciting work, and it's not rewarded. It's sort of the inverse. We get shamed when something goes bad, but if it's working right and fine, things just move along. It's not a problem until it's a problem. There's a good analogy Adam was telling me about the people who produce the sound for events like this. If my audio was just to cut out and not work right, or feedback or whatever, there's quick blame to go to the sound person. But if it works flawlessly, it just works. No one's going to go give that guy a high five that it worked great. It doesn't. So when it goes wrong, it goes wrong. It's just not glamorous. So one way to combat ignorance is through education, right? We just need to sort of understand vulnerabilities. And this is where I welcome you to the security community. Please wipe your feet. So as we learn about the things that we learn, we pass them on. And just like that seed crystal, our community grows. And when I talk to developers, I often get asked about, what is the new scary shit? What does the security community know that I don't know and that I should fix in my app? And I'm going to tell you, the simple stuff still works. It still works from years and years and years and years ago when we found these vulnerabilities, and the information has been out there. We continue to go along this Mobius strip of development, moving ahead, and we're not learning from our past mistakes. We're just not doing it. And there's some other things there too. While I have you captive, we're going to sort of talk about a few things that devs find scary. Let's talk about a few sort of tangible things. I pulled my Twitter feed and asked developers what they cared about security-wise and what they found scary and difficult to implement, things that they thought that they were going to screw up implementing. And those two things fell to the top: validation, sanitization, and crypto, right? Mike West already talked to you about content injection, so I'm not going to do that, and about the ways to validate and sanitize your data, properly in content security policy and those things. And Martin talked about crypto a bit. If you want to learn more, I think he mentioned this, the Modesano has a crypto challenge where you can learn about building crypto systems and breaking them. I really recommend going through those. As a developer, it will level up your game quite a bit when it comes to crypto. Martin also suggested before the talk that I mention the courses on by Dan Bone on crypto. There's a crypto course. It will blow your mind, but it's a short course and it's worth it. So I'm not going to talk about those things. I'm going to talk about something that I'm a bit more familiar with that is JavaScript related. It is not node.conf, I realize, but it is JS related all the same, and it is NPM. We're using NPM to install a lot of things: client-side code, server-side code, all the modules, right? There's 40,000 plus modules out there, and the Node Security Project is working on auditing those things. And we started the project because we were trying to secure a product, our product Anbang. It's built on Node. And we were finding ways to compromise the product. We felt we had our code base really solid, but we had one interesting thing. We had code injection. A bunch of people in this room were writing code for our product, right? And they were injecting it into our app, and I was, basically trusting that code was good. And so I was looking for ways on how I could inject code into other developers' projects, right? What exists for vulnerabilities there? So come along, npm install CoffeeScript. Is this right? No, this is not right. It's npm install coffee-script. And there's a number of developers out there that hate me for publishing that module. So I actually took it down. Please don't put it up. Please do not put it back up. I'm mentioning this here and now because this is a problem. We are a smart community. Everyone here is much smarter than I am in terms of solving some of these problems. We need to address this. So what I did was I took the top 100 modules, and I did a typo analysis of those. And then I did a passive analysis on all of the NPM logs, which the project was gracious enough to give me, so I didn't have to publish all of these modules and see what happened. And a lot of things bubbled to the surface. Package names with punctuation, dashes, periods, things like that, get misspelled way more often than other things. But it's a really interesting attack surface, and it's a really big problem. So when I published CoffeeScript, it got 200 installs, roughly, in about a week, and it took that long to be discovered. It did nothing. It was blank. It had a README. If I had mimicked the behavior of CoffeeScript, chances are it would have taken a lot longer to be identified. So there's my random scary shit for the talk. So what else? Process, right? So we go back to the hey, we can't make 100% secure software. It's going to be a process. It's going to exist, and we're going to do it forever. What you can't do, though, is you can't just shove process down in the face of developers and expect them to abide by your law of security in your organization. It doesn't work. I tried to do that at Andiet, and they basically said, right? We don't love strict processes. We work in much different ways. And I'm sort of being vague on some of this because you need to find out what your process is for your team. It's going to differ a lot for each team. Let's see. One other thing is that we can take a lesson from attackers here, in that we have a really interesting position inside of our organization, inside of our communities, and that's a position that attackers would love to be in. Insider threat. We can sort of turn that on its head, right? We're in a position where we can affect change. We can actually influence, and we can just change the process. It's not immutable. It's like code. Your habits, your education, they're not mutable. We can change them. So we need to do that. We need to take and change how you're approaching things. and integrate security into basically every aspect of the organization, and do so from, if management doesn't care, well, there's ways to help influence that, just doing it, and just sort of take over. Community, bridge all the worlds. So I want you to read a blog post by Adam Brault. It was published a few days ago from some discussions and topics that happened at NodeConf. And it talks about how to be a good community member in terms of other development communities pointing and laughing and shaming. We're really good at that in the security community. We're really good at pointing and laughing at all of the code you write, the things that you do, and we don't pull any punches, right? We basically that's what we're good at. And I used to think of myself not as a dev. And earlier this year, so I used to think of myself just as a security person trying to help developers. And I dropped that on the floor earlier. I dropped that trope earlier and said, okay, I'm going to accept that I'm a developer and that I belong in both communities. I dropped that trope, and now I'm just a bad dev. I'm just not, the code I write is shit, but I'm embracing that role, which as soon as I embrace that role, I can get better. I realize that this is my responsibility to learn how to do these things better. And I'm wondering if it's not time for developers to drop the trope that they aren't a little bit security people, or any other fringe community that might be related to development, that maybe you should be involved a little bit more in that and say, well, I'm a bad security person. I can get better. I realize why devs don't join the security community is because we can be very abrasive and crass, and it's an unappealing place, right? We're not necessarily that kind, but we can combat that. Come in numbers, it'll be good. The last thing that I want to plug, sort of out of the blue, something random, and what I think that we all should do is we should put SecurityMD files in our projects. It helps explain how you want vulnerabilities disclosed in your projects. It helps communicate the security constraints around your projects. It tells how the constraints in which your project was designed. Communicate the things about security in this file. Maybe it's just an email address. I want vulnerabilities disclosed here. I want you to tell me here, and give people a process. If you want a good example, check out Ember.js's. They've got a fantastic disclosure process. It is a model for how we should be doing things with other JavaScript related projects. So, we've got homework. If you've got nothing out of this at all, do this. Go to OWASP, look at the top 10, learn about one type of vulnerability. I don't care what it is. Hopefully it's something related to something that you're working on. Audit some of your code. Dig in. If you don't understand it, jump into some security communities, IRC channels. Try to interact and learn about that. Figure out how you can fix that vulnerability, and then teach somebody on your team about what you did. Just show them over lunch. That's going to you're going to be that seed crystal that's going to start forming and start changing this community. And I've got some homework for you now, because I'm going to finish up about 5 minutes early. You've got some conf work to do. I want you to take lunch as an opportunity to talk to each other about what you do in terms of security. Some good questions are, how do you handle security on your projects? And if the answer is, I don't, come talk to me or find somebody else. Bring somebody else in and talk about it. What's a vulnerability that you've had in your code? What's a bug that's affected security, and how have you addressed it? Tell those stories. Talk to each other. And that will have an immediate, and it will have a lasting impact on our community. Thank you.